So Pillow Hands Arman Tsarukyan just knocked out Beneil Dariush in the first round, proving that he actually has power now. And I promise you guys, I'm not going to be coping in this video. I'm just going to break down the fights. I did horribly on this card, and I know that's not going to come as a surprise to some of you, but I did get the Turner and Bobby Green pick right. We're going to go in depth into the main fights that were really juicy, and tomorrow I'll do a full recap of the entire card, but I'm going to talk about the big four. If you want to check the timestamps in the description, I'll have the other fights that I'll give my takes on as well. But let's get into the main event. Arman Tsarukyan. I picked Beneil Dariush to beat him. I knew how competitive this fight was. I just didn't see Arman Tsarukyan knocking out Beneil Dariush with a right hand. All right, Arman Tsarukyan's not someone that's really known for his power. And yes, I understand that Beneil Dariush is slow. He's not that fast. He's a slow starter. He just got knocked out a few months ago against Charles Oliveira, but I've made the mistake of writing people off too much after they get finished, all right? And I didn't want to make that mistake this time. I've seen many examples, especially recently, where guys bounce back after taking a lot of damage and getting KO'd a few times, and their chin is just fine. For example, Dan Hooker, getting knocked out a few times, coming back to fight Jalin Turner and being just fine and not getting dropped in that matchup. Charles Oliveira, getting dropped by Islam Makhachev, coming back, knocking out Beneil Dariush. And Justin Gaethje, getting knocked out by Charles, coming out, or not knocked out, but getting knocked down, flying across the octagon, and then coming back to beat Fiziev and Dustin Poirier. Beneil Dariush gets hit with one shot, right hand, perfect combination. I'm going to talk about the combo. It wasn't just, oh, Arman landed one shot, puncher's chance. It wasn't that. Beneil Dariush was a little reluctant. He was standing there in the middle of the octagon, and Arman Tsarukyan let go a double jab, followed it with a right into a knee. None of those landed flush. The knee didn't even land. And then behind the knee, as he was putting his knee right back down, he landed a right hand. Perfect on the jaw of Beneil Dariush. Knocks his ass out. Beneil goes stiff. And that's the end of his career. All right? Again, I'm going to have people in the comments that are going to be saying things like, reactionary Tracy, prisoner of the moment, Beneil's not done, bro. How are you going to write him off after this? Well, you know, I didn't want to write him off after getting finished by Charles. And look at what happens. Out of all people, Arman's the guy to chin him. And Arman, although he finishes people on the ground, he doesn't really finish people a lot in the stand-up. I guess, you know, that if Arman was going to find the KO, it was going to be early when Beneil Dariush is not really switched on. As I said, he's a little slow out there. He looked like a tortoise early on, throwing those overhands, but that's to be expected with him. He was landing a lot of good, hard, heavy kicks, which I expected as well, but Arman gets the jump on him. Really good win for Arman Tsarukyan. Listen, man, like, I don't know how to process this. Am I supposed to say to myself, all right, Arman has this devastating power now, or am I just supposed to look at this as his striking is improving? I'll take it as his striking is improving because, again, that was what, like a 5-6 piece combination on Beneil Dariush, landing the big shot that counted at the end of it. Beautiful work from Arman. We know how good he is on the ground, too. And someone suggested that he should fight Jalin Turner next. I think it's been a while, even though I don't really like Arman. He's been getting like these outside of the top 5 matchups for way too long, sometimes even outside of the top 15, and it's time for him to really get a number 1 contenders fight. He had that close fight with Makhachev back in the day. Let's see Arman Tsarukyan fight someone like Charles Oliveira or Justin Gaethje next, someone that's going to get him into a title fight because, yes, you know, he kind of deserves it, all right? I wanted to see Arman get fucked up, especially with how he was acting against Bobby Green this week, but he pulls off a great win. And I'm giving him his credit, man. Really good win for Arman Tsarukyan. Again, I wanted to give Beneil that chance, and I thought that if Arman wasn't going to KO him, which just didn't seem that likely in my mind, then Beneil was going to be able to get the better of him. We didn't really see any grappling, not too much to take away from there. But again, like as I said, a little bit salty about this one. A little bit salty about this one, right? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I thought that I had a good pick. As I said on my live stream, you know, the people that were picking Beneil Dariush, we were in the lab. We were with the test tubes and the beakers. We were doing our calculations. We were really seeing how this one was going to go down. And the guys that picked Arman were like, you know, Beneil got KO'd by Charles. Arman didn't get KO'd by Charles. Basically, you know. I know some of you guys are going to be mad at that, but I just kind of feel like Beneil Dariush was a good pick. So let me cope a bit. I said I wasn't going to cope. Let me cope a bit. All right? People that were picking Arman Tsarukyan were just flowing with whatever way the wind were. If the wind takes me this way, I'm going to pick Arman, man. I'm picking Arman. Whereas us Beneil pickers, we were the big brains of the operation. Okay? Let's chill out. Let me get the cope out. Arman looked good. Beneil's slow. I cannot believe I ever picked this guy to beat Charles. I cannot believe I ever picked this guy to beat Charles. I recognize that as a dumb pick. The moment I rewatched Beneil Dariush's fight with Mateusz Gamrot, I just thought that if there's anyone in the top 5 that isn't going to finish Beneil, it's going to be Arman. He gets it done. He gets it done. Beautiful win from Arman Tsarukyan. He pulls this one off. I may not like him. I may want to see him get KO'd stiff by Makhachev. I may want to see him get beat by Oliveira. But knowing now that he's, again, how young is Arman Tsarukyan? I'm pretty sure, let me guess, I'm going to go ahead and say he's only 28. Arman Tsarukyan age, I'm looking it up, 27. Newly 27 as well. He just turned 27 in October. That's crazy. So he's improving. He's not that big for 155. I could totally see him starting to gain a little bit more pop in his hands. We've seen that with guys in the lightweight division like Makhachev. He wasn't really out here hurting people badly, finishing people as a great striker early on in his career. And then he fights Charles Oliveira. He fights Volkanovski. Now we're looking at him as like one of the best strikers in the sport. Arman Tsarukyan has, in my opinion, the talent. It's just the power that holds him back. But hey, he just knocked out Beneil. If he can add some more pop on those shots, like this guy is going to be a pretty decent striker. Again, we didn't see a lot with the, we didn't see a lot of the defense in this fight. So that's still, in my opinion, something that leaves a lot to be desired from Arman Tsarukyan. But I'm looking forward to seeing his next fight. Give him, as I said, Justin Gaethje or Charles, unless Charles is fighting Makhachev. I don't know what's going on with Makhachev. Someone needs to get this guy in the fucking cage. Otherwise, he's not going to fight until October of 2024. And I just can't stand that, man. If he does fight Gaethje, I kind of like Arman Tsarukyan's chances. Now, of course, we know how dangerous Gaethje is. This is not slow twitch Beneil, but Gaethje also has a serious hole in his ground game. And we know if he gets taken down by Arman, Arman's going to destroy him and cut through him like butter. So yeah, I just have to say Arman this week, the antics, the pressing Bobby Green with the whole crew and acting like Nate Diaz rubbed me the wrong way. I don't have to like him, but it's okay. The guy's really good. And sad to see Beneil Dariush get finished back-to-back. He's never going to win a belt, ever. And his chin, I think I can say, is gone at this point. Maybe some of you guys are going to disagree, but I'm going to learn my lesson this time. But let's get on to the next one. Jalin Turner, Bobby Green. We got to talk about the stoppage. We will talk about the stoppage. But listen, got to feel for Bobby Green, man. He was supposed to fight Dan Hooker, and instead he gets Jalin Turner. And I know that Dan Hooker beat Jalin Turner, but I actually rewatched that fight recently. You guys, you might disagree. I think it was a draw. I really think it was a draw. People act like Dan Hooker sunned him or fraud checked him that badly. And to be honest, in a way he did, but Turner bounced back with this one, and this was really a performance to remind people how talented he is, because how often do people clean Bobby Green up like that? The only guys that have done that to him, we're talking Dustin Poirier. We're talking people in Makhachev company. No one gets rid of Bobby Green like that. Like, this dude is known for either getting robbed or beating the fuck out of most people on the feet. So the stoppage itself, brutal stoppage, okay? Referees, like, listen, I was complaining earlier on in this card that these guys will let the prelim fighters fight to the death, basically, and they're too quick to jump in for main events or big spots on main cards, which is the case. If you look at Yuri Prohaska getting finished, I thought that was an early stoppage against Alex Pereira. Mark Goddard is the king of early stoppages. But the worst one I saw this year was Bondar versus this other guy in the flyweight division. Bondar's the name of the guy that got KO'd. I forget the name of the guy that finished him, but he basically slammed this guy, knocked him out with the slam, and then elbowed him with 6 shots after he was unconscious from the slam. That was one of the most brutal KOs I've ever seen. Worse than the Bobby Green, Jalin Turner stoppage. But obviously, because it wasn't as big of a fight, it didn't get as much of a spotlight. These referees need to be held accountable. Like, they really do. I don't know how they're going to hold them accountable. I don't know if it's necessarily fair to fire them, but this is one of those situations where you got to keep an eye out on these people. These referees, you got to keep an eye out on them. And if they ever fuck up like this again, you've got to fire them. And one thing that I have to say is I feel like the UFC needs more control over how to handle these situations, because I don't know if the refs are necessarily working with the UFC or if they're working with the athletic commissions. Like, maybe some of you guys can remind me in the comments, but if they're working with the athletic commissions and those are the people that are supposed to reprimand them, then it could be out of control. It could be out of the hands of the UFC brass or whatnot, but you can't be out here fucking with people's lives. You know what I mean? A couple more strikes, and that could have been real ugly. I did see a video of Bobby Green and Jalin Turner backstage dapping each other up, and they were fine. So it's good to see Bobby Green is okay, but again, that was a insane amount of damage that he took, unanswered shots. Not the worst stoppage I've seen. I think that people may be overreacting, calling that the worst stoppage in history or whatever. It wasn't. I think the Bondar stoppage, go back and watch that. That was truly horrific. He was out cold the entire time. But yeah, this was a bad one. Jalin Turner gets done, rocks Bobby Green, drops him. That straight left to Jalin Turner is nasty, man. I mean, this performance really did remind me that this guy still has potential to be a champion. And I know a lot of you guys were clowning me and saying that I was glazing Jalin Turner earlier this year. I was saying that Dan Hooker's fucked. He has no chance. Again, I mentioned this earlier in the video, but Dan Hooker had been finished a bunch of times. Look at what Jalin Turner just did to Bobby Green. He's capable of doing that to anyone in this division. That's obviously not like Makhachev and Oliveira, guys that will be able to take him down. But I do still think that Jalin Turner has a high ceiling, and I do still think he's going to be a top 5 guy. Again, if you look at the people that have cleaned up Green like this, I know that Bobby's 37, but he's not your typical 37-year-old. You know what I'm saying. He's one of the very few guys that's been able to maintain their fast twitch ability, that's been able to maintain the hand-eye coordination, their eyesight, everything. Okay? And Bobby Green's never had like crazy power. He has a gas tank. He's still fit. Jalin Turner, on short notice, makes weight. Mad respect to Jalin Turner, especially if you take into consideration he turned down the fight at first. He got another call from the UFC, and I feel like that's maybe because he missed weight going into the Hooker fight, and they were hard on him for this one. And Jalin said himself, he felt like he couldn't turn this down. You already know, if fighters turn down these spots, especially when the UFC is hooting and hollering for them to get in the cage, that kind of means, hey, man, if you don't fight, we're going to hold you out for a year. All right, we're going to make it 10 times harder for you to get a title shot. So it's really good that Jalin Turner was able to get his respect back and get the win to save this big co-main event spot. And someone mentioned this, but I would love to see Jalin Turner and Rafael Fiziev when Fiziev comes back. Fiziev is higher up than Jalin Turner. Turner loses to Hooker. He gets himself back into the 12, 11 spot area. Either that or you give him to Benoit Saint-Denis. I'd love to see him fight Fiziev, and I actually think I'd pick him to beat Fiziev. But either of those matchups would be great. I think that Fiziev is probably going to be next for Jalin Turner, and I guess he'll stay at lightweight. If he can make 155 pounds on a couple of days' notice, he'll be good to make 155 with a training camp. Rob Font versus Deiveson Figueiredo, okay? Another fight that I got wrong. I thought Rob Font was going to KO Deiveson Figueiredo. Figueiredo looked horrible against Brandon Moreno. His volume has dropped off of a cliff. He's gone through a bunch of wars. Yes, Rob Font's not that durable, but Deiveson Figueiredo, it seemed like his chin wasn't as strong as it used to be. And I thought that the reach of Rob Font was really going to give Deiveson Figueiredo, a guy who always looks like he's winding up. I kind of equate it to, it looks like he's throwing a baseball before he throws a punch. I thought that Rob Font was going to be able to catch Deiveson Figueiredo, who has low output, who's always winding up. But what I did find is that, man, I really underestimated the skill level of these flyweights. I really did. I think that's the story of this fight. I was saying in my prediction video, and I couldn't be further from correct here, I was saying that there are about 80 bantamweights, 70, 80 bantamweights in the UFC. How many flyweights are there? 20? The competition to get to the top of the bantamweight division is much stiffer. These guys, like Rob Font, they're just as good as Deiveson Figueiredo's. And I think that Figueiredo, who's a little bit older, whose best days are behind him, unlike Rob Font, who seems like he's one of those old guys that still has it, I think he's screwed. I think he's going to get KO'd unless he could bring this fight to the ground. It was actually the case that the movement of Deiveson Figueiredo, that flyweight movement, right? We've seen Chito Vera fight Rob Font. He's right in front of him, and that's Chito's style. But we've also seen Adrian Yanez, a guy that's a little bit lighter on his feet than Chito Vera, right in front of him. Deiveson Figueiredo, who in a way is kind of one of these, I'm not going to say plotty, but he's one of these, like, I don't know, he doesn't move that much in the flyweight division compared to other guys. He's like the guy that kind of brutally stalks you down, right? Heavy footwork stalking you down. This was like the light, on his feet guy in the bantamweight division, making bantamweights look plotty, right? I mean, Rob Font just couldn't pin him down, and Figgy was making him pay when Font would throw, and he would counter him hard with the right hand. Font got hit early. That power of Figueiredo holds up at bantamweight just fine. Figgy had the speed advantage. He had the power advantage. His chin looked better than ever at 135 pounds. And Figgy proved me wrong, man. A lot of guys proved me wrong. Arman proved me wrong. Figgy proved me wrong too, because he looked great at 135. And I think this was an amazing move. Again, Rob Font's one of these guys that has like a really long reach at bantamweight. He's a pretty big bantamweight for his height too. Figueiredo got dwarfed at the weigh-ins, and he's out here muscling around Rob Font, taking him down too. Now, the grappling of Figgy, not as dominant as I would have expected. Rob Font was able to get back up to his feet a bunch of times and stuff a bunch of takedowns, whereas Sandhagen was able to keep him down with a torn tricep. I think that the size element matters a lot when it comes to the grappling, but on the feet, Figgy looks great. He looks amazing. And he was eating all of Rob Font's punches like tic-tacs. So a rejuvenated Figueiredo who looks great at bantamweight, who's got movement. He's going to be hard to pin down. He has a speed advantage. Let's keep him active. He hardly took any damage. I'd like to see Figueiredo fight on UFC 300. You know what would be a good matchup? Figueiredo versus Petr Yan, opening of the main card for UFC 300. Or if you want to really stack the card, you put Figueiredo on the prelims. Again, we're talking about UFC 300. Don't freak out on me because I'm saying he should be on the prelims. UFC 300, Figueiredo versus maybe, I don't want to say Dominic Cruz because, come on, what are we going to have him win 3 times before he even gets a number 1 contenders fight? Like, this is a former champion. Let's put some respect on his name. Give him a number 1 contenders fight. Petr Yan would be interesting. Maybe Henry Cejudo, but nah, he trains with Henry. There's another guy that I'm thinking of. Maybe Merab Dvalishvili. I'd like to see a matchup like that. Let's just get Figueiredo to fight on UFC 300 against one of these guys, man. Maybe Song Yadong. How fun would that be? Song Yadong, Figueiredo, UFC 300, prelims, right? Let's make it happen. Last but not least, we have Kelvin Gastelum getting dominated by Sean the Wet Blanket Brady. I picked Kelvin Gastelum. This isn't one of those fights where I was confident in it. I just thought that Kelvin Gastelum's wrestling background, he'll be able to keep it standing, and Sean Brady's got little pillow hands. He's not that good on the feet, and he's not known for like his really good timing on takedowns, but Sean Brady made Kelvin Gastelum look like the typical shit plotty middleweight that we're used to seeing throughout the past couple of years. And I picked Kelvin Gastelum because he was cutting down into the 170-pound weight class. To me, that screamed his discipline is on 100, right? He's got his discipline. He's focused now more than ever. His training is going to be on point, and he's going to have like a size and strength advantage. But Brady really showcased levels between the welterweight division and the middleweight division. Yes, Gastelum was going out there punching at range like he was a WMMA fighter, lunging in with these punches that had nothing on them to cover the distance. They looked miserable. He was throwing these little pitter-pat leg kicks in the first couple of rounds. I would have liked him to kind of just march Brady down and slug in the pocket a little bit. But hey, every time he would get close, Brady would shoot a takedown, and he took down Gastelum and ended up submitting him in the 3rd round. And yes, Sean Brady's boring. Yes, he shushed the crowd when they were already shushed because they were half asleep. But respect to Sean Brady. And this makes Belal Muhammad's win over Sean Brady look really good. I just saw a tweet that Belal put out there saying, hey, I thought you guys were saying Brady was trash. And to be honest, Brady isn't even that good. Like, some of you guys are going to be out here hyping up Brady as if, oh man, we knew all along he was really that guy. It's just, Belal's good too. No, Brady's not really that guy. Kelvin Gastelum just had a one-off performance where he looked like vintage KG against a favorable matchup in Chris Curtis, who's a plotty man, okay, who just slugs it out in the pocket. That's what Kelvin Gastelum likes to do as well. Listen, Sean Brady is still all right, but don't hype him up too much. It's KG. I know I picked KG. It's easy to say that's a horrible pick in hindsight. I totally get it, but stylistically, on paper, KG is supposed to be the guy that has some wrestling experience. He's going to be big and strong. The striking ain't even going to be close. Like, Brady's going to have to really work for the takedowns, and I just think Gastelum's going to fuck him up when they get near each other. But that didn't happen. Brady gets on top of him, puts on a grappling clinic. Not as boring as he was in the past. This wasn't Sean Brady just wet blanketing or Sean Brady hugging onto someone's back. He was actually staying active and looking for submissions, looking for little ground and pound strikes. I'm happy he gets a finish because the fans have treated this guy like shit. So good for Sean Brady. Kelvin Gastelum looked like shit. Okay, I think both things can be true. I think I really just bought into the Kelvin Gastelum resurgence hype, and I think a lot of you guys probably bought into that too. He looked great against Curtis, but it's Curtis at middleweight, and this kind of, again, reminds me that there are big skill gaps between divisions, just like the Figueiredo and Rob Font fight reminds me of, because I was saying bantamweight and flyweight, really both of them are just as good as the other. Bantamweight may even be better, but for the most part, it's usually the case that when people move into a lower weight class, they're screwed. And we saw that with a couple of other fights on this card. Like, you have Jared Gooden beating Turman. You know, Jared Gooden's like one of the shittiest welterweights on the roster, and Thurman's a former middleweight. And Gooden looks like he's pretty good out there. So I'll break down the other fights in the full card tomorrow on a full card recap. But I just wanted to hit on all of these ones. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Until next time.